Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We are still not really sure exactly who won Iowa, but CBS News has so far awarded Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg an equal number of delegates. With just 2 days from the New Hampshire primary, our CBS News battleground tracker shows the two are at the top in New Hampshire too. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who won the New Hampshire primary 4 years ago, is at the very top with 29%. Former Mayor Pete Buttigieg is running behind him. He's at 25%. We'll have the full results of our poll later on in the broadcast, but we begin with those two top candidates. Senator Bernie Sanders is up first, and he joins us from Manchester. Good morning to you, Senator.
Good morning, Margaret.
How do you plan to keep that edge and win on Tuesday?
We are running all over the state. We're talking to as many people as we can. We're talking about what our agenda is, which is an agenda that speaks for the working families of this country, an agenda that is prepared to take on the powerful special interests that have so much influence over the economic and political life of our country. And by the way, we're going to contrast our views with Mayor Buttigieg. And one of the areas of contrast, to be honest with you, is that last count, he has about 40 billionaires who are contributing to his campaign, the heads of the CEOs of the large pharmaceutical industries, the insurance companies, and so forth.
Why does that matter?
Well, on the other hand, it matters enormously. That is precisely the problem with American politics. When you have the heads of large pharmaceutical companies contributing to your campaign, you are not going to aggressively deal with the fact that in some cases we pay 10 times more for the same exact drugs as our friends in Canada or in Europe pay. You're not going to take on the collusion and the corruption of the drug companies who are ripping us off every single day. 1 out of 5 Americans cannot even afford the prescription drugs their doctors prescribe. So do you really think that when somebody gets contributions from the CEOs of drug companies, they're going to stand up to the greed and corruption of that industry? I don't think so. But it's not only the pharmaceutical industry.
But when you were standing on
were
standing on that debate stage on Friday, you said that Democrats would come together and support a nominee. Are you saying
yes.
Bernie Sanders will support Pete Buttigieg if he ends up being the nominee, or even Mike Bloomberg, a billionaire himself?
No, I did not say that at all. I think all of them will be far preferable to Donald Trump, who is the most dangerous and corrupt president in the modern history of this country. We have got to defeat Trump.
Sorry, to be clear, you would support either of them if they end up being the nominee?
Margaret, I have said from the first day of this campaign that it is absolutely imperative that we defeat Donald Trump. Of course I will support who the Democratic nominee is. But in the Democratic primary process, I will distinguish myself, differentiate myself from the other candidates. And one of the areas that I differentiate myself is we have raised more campaign contributions from more Americans, averaging all of $18.50 than any candidate in the history of this country.
Your campaign reported some inconsistencies in the results out in Iowa, as did 2 other campaigns. Columnist Peggy Noonan wrote this: "They can't run a tiny caucus in a tiny state, but they want us to believe they can reinvent American health care." How damaging is it that the Democrats couldn't get this right?
It is damaging, and it really saddens me because, you know, I went all over the state of Iowa, and they're beautiful people, good people, who take their responsibility seriously. And the fact that the Iowa Democratic Party, that has received all kinds of money, could not count those votes in a timely manner is really a sad state of affairs.
Right, but you're advocating for the empowerment of the U.S. government to take over the entire health care system. This just optically looks like the party can't run its own caucus.
Margaret, that's not a true statement. I'm not advocating for the United States government to take over the health care system. What I am advocating for is an expansion of Medicare. Medicare exists.
Right.
I want to expand it over a 4-year period.
Which would be administered by the U.S. government.
Precisely, just as Medicare is right now. But it's not a takeover. People will still go to the same doctor. They'll go to the same hospital. We will substantially lower the cost of prescription drugs. cost per person will go down.
Right,
People will be paying less for health care. But
the
it's
nub
not a
of the
takeover.
The nub of the criticism, though, is that this is a question of competency. And straight out of the gate, how do you reassure the public that the party whose ticket you are running on can do this and do this successfully in the states ahead? Nevada is already saying when it comes to their caucuses, they're short of volunteers. Our campaign reporter says they're short 1,000 caucus chairs, and they might have to even hold 2 caucuses at once. This doesn't look efficient.
Well, all right, that may well be the case, but let's get back to the United States government. I'm not the chair of the Nevada Democratic Party.
You told my colleague Nora O'Donnell recently on CBS that you couldn't put a price tag on your health care plan and your proposals. But I want to ask you for some clarity here, because back in July you told the Washington Post Medicare for all would cost between $30 to $40 trillion over 10 years. Do you still trust those numbers and those estimates?
Sure. All that I said, the answer is yes. But all that I said is anybody who tells you what anything is going to cost in health care, it's not telling you the truth. There is so much. It's so big. If we do nothing,
so it's not
the health
30
and
to
human
40
services
trillion
over a 10-year period.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, the problem is we're already spending about 50% of healthcare dollars already come from the federal government. We got to add the other 50%. But here's the main point that people should appreciate. If we do nothing, according to Health and Human Services, we're going to be spending $50 trillion. We spend twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of Canada or Europe. So, of course, we can provide healthcare to all people spending less than we are doing now, because we're going to end the $100 billion in profiteering that goes to the drug companies, that goes to the insurance companies, and the hundreds of billions of dollars in administration of thousands of separate plans, an enormously complicated and wasteful system.
Senator Sanders, thank you for your time.